The ninth season of Formula One competition was set up to be an exciting one. The calendar was expanded to double-digit World Championship races for the first time. A new storyline to follow would be the Constructor's title, as teams could now compete for a championship for the first time in F1. Stirling Moss's Vanwall entry was expected to be very unreliable, while Mike Hawthorn's Ferrari was going to lack some speed but be nearly bulletproof. It was going to be a fierce battle all year long. However, the main storylines of the season would be covered up by tragedy and would end up being the deadliest season in F1's history. In less than 5 months, 4 young drivers would be killed in separate accidents. Right before the video starts, make sure you guys leave a like if you enjoy and subscribe if you haven't already. Anyway, let's get right into it. The season opening race in Argentina was very early in the year, on January 19th, more than 4 months earlier than race 2 at Monaco. Vanwall didn't have a car that was ready to be competitive, so they allowed Stirling Moss to race for a rival team for this one event. In fact, most of the teams were not finished developing a car or preparing one, so only 10 drivers entered the race. This is the fewest entries in F1's 70-year history. Moss took victory racing for the Rob Walker Racing Team, with Ferrari's Luigi Musso and Mike Hawthorn rounding out the podium. Rob Walker Racing Team would win the Monaco Grand Prix 4 months later, with Musso finishing second again. Another Ferrari driver, Britain's Peter Collins, would finish third. Stirling Moss, as many feared, retired from the race due to an engine failure. A week later, Vanwall would sweep the top 3 in qualifying, with Stewart Lewis Evans and Moss taking the front row. Moss took home the victory. The Constructors' Championship and driver standings were shaping up to be an all-out war between Ferrari and Vanwall. Round 3 would be a trip to the United States. As many of you know, the Indy 500 counted as an FIA World Championship race in the 50s and early 60s, despite an overwhelming majority of F1 drivers not taking part in it. But the first tragedy of the F1 season would occur just seconds into this race. Patrick O'Connor was a 29-year-old Indiana native who was a fan favorite for the Indy 500 crowd. Just days before the running of the 42nd Indy 500, O'Connor was featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated after his second-row start for the Indy 500. The 3-time Midwest Sprint Car champion had won the 1957 Indy 500 pole and was a dark horse pick to win this year's race. The start of the race was odd. The pace car didn't speed up and the flagman didn't throw the green flag, so the fans and drivers alike were confused. The next time around, the race went green. Pole sitter Dick Rathman and Ed Elysian went wheel-to-wheel through the first 2 turns and Ed prevailed. Ed entered turn 3 way too deep and spun out. He collected Rathman and both cars were destroyed. However, the real chaos started seconds later when the rest of the field caught up. Patrick O'Connor tried to avoid the wreck by escaping on the apron, but ramped over another car and launched into the air. His car came down headfirst and bursted into flames. A dozen more cars piled in, resulting in one of the worst crashes Indianapolis has ever seen. Pat was killed instantly from a fractured skull. Pat had just opened a motel and laundromat in his hometown of North Vinnon, leaving behind his wife and 18-month-old son. As a result of the crash, Ed Elysian would be suspended by USAC and shunned by fans and drivers. The next year, in 1959, Ed would be fatally wounded in a crash at the Milwaukee Mile. Because of the accident, the starting procedure was revamped and metal roll bars behind the driver's head were required for the following year. Additionally, helmets were now required to pass a safety inspection prior to the race. 2 weeks later, the F1 season continued at Spa. Ferrari brought upgrades to the race and was comprehensively faster in qualifying than Vanwall for the first time all season. Hawthorn and Musso locked out the front row, the team's first lockout of the season. The 24-lap race was by no means a sprint, as the pole time was just under 4 minutes. Within 5 laps, Stirling Moss and 2 Ferraris had dropped out of the race. This allowed Van Wall to score a double podium with Tony Brooks and Stuart Lewis-Evans. This was clearly a duel between Van Wall and Ferrari for the Constructors' title and Hawthorn versus Moss for the driver title. Ferrari showed up strong in the next round at the French GP, with Hawthorn and Musso locking out the front row for the second race in a row. However, the championship battle would take a tragic blow halfway into the race. Luigi Musso was living any Italian racer's dream. He was racing for Ferrari in F1, winning races, and picking up podiums left and right. He was third in the championship and seemed to be getting quicker each and every week. But he was in a fierce rivalry with his teammates Mike Hawthorn and Peter Collins. Luigi's wife in an interview said the rivalry encouraged all three drivers to take more risks than any other drivers. This was not a friendly rivalry, as Collins and Hawthorn had an agreement in which if one of them won, they would split the prize money. Luigi was not included in the agreement. This must have been especially frustrating because he was reportedly in debt at the time. Hawthorn kept the lead of the French GP, but Musso followed closely behind and eventually started catching his teammate. At one of the track's fastest corners, Musso pushed way too hard. He hit the corner's inside curb at more than 150 miles per hour and took flight. He landed in a ditch and flew through a wheat field. Musso was ejected from the car while it tumbled below him. He was still breathing at the time of the accident, but died just hours later. Race 7 was a much-needed quiet race, with Peter Collins and Mike Hawthorn securing a 1-2 for Ferrari, but it was a return to tragedy in Germany. The Nürburgring was one of the world's most infamous and dangerous tracks. So dangerous, F1 shortened the race distance to only 15 laps. Many teams simply did not show up to the race, so the FIA allowed Formula 2 cars to enter the race to fill the field. After a flying start, Peter Collins jumped from P4 up to second. He had Van Wall rival Tony Brooks in sight, and like his former teammate Musso, overstepped the boundaries too far, chasing first place. He entered a corner too quickly and ran wide. He lost control of his Ferrari, flipped into the air, and was thrown from the car. As his car came to rest, Collins struck a tree. Medic crews found him alive and rushed him to a nearby hospital for surgery, but he passed later in the afternoon. Peter was only 26. Next up was the Portuguese Grand Prix, which was a highly controversial race. Championship rivals Moss and Hawthorn posted the exact same time in qualifying. The teams had intense arguments about which driver would start first, but it was decided that Moss would start first as he posted the time first. Then, during the race, Hawthorn went for a spin from second place. He refired his engine, but he was facing the wrong way with oncoming cars. The stewards disqualified Hawthorn initially, but took back his disqualification after Stirling Moss insisted he did nothing wrong. In the next race, Hawthorn would essentially secure the championship after finishing second at Monza. This was because Moss fell out of the race before halfway. Tony Brooks would help secure Van Wall the first Constructor's title by winning the Italian GP by nearly half a minute. The final race of the season at the Moroccan Grand Prix was set up to be a historic day for either Moss or Hawthorn to win the championship. Moss needed to win and set the fastest lap, without Hawthorn finishing on the podium to win the title. This race was F1's only trip to Morocco, and like many times so far in this season, it would be covered by one big black eye. Van Wall's Stuart Lewis-Evans had an engine failure on lap 41, resulting in a big crash. His car bursted into flames and Stuart sat inside burning. He managed to escape the wreckage, but had suffered horrible burns. He died 6 days later. Team owner Tony Vandervelde took the passing of Stuart very hard. Not only did this ruin the championship celebration completely, but Tony folded his team after the season. It said he hadn't recovered from the tragic passing of his good friend. Mike Hawthorn secured the World Championship and decided to retire from racing completely after the accident-filled season. However, just 3 months into retirement, he was driving his Jaguar Mark I at 80 miles per hour down a highway and crashed. Hawthorn clipped a "Keep Left" sign, causing him to lose control of the car. He slammed into a tree off the highway and was killed instantly. Nearly 30 years later, team owner Rob Walker admitted to be racing with Hawthorn on that day. This had been speculated since the day of the crash. And just like that, Ferrari's lineup in race 1 of the 1958 season had been wiped out completely in less than 1 year. Bresci, Luigi Musso's wife, had this to say years later. "I had hated them both, first because I was aware of certain facts that were not right, and also because when I came out of the hospital and went back to the hotel, I found them in the square outside the hotel, laughing and playing a game of football with an empty beer can. So when they died, too, it was liberating for me. Otherwise, I would have had unpleasant feelings towards them forever. This way, I could find a sense of peace." And that's it for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy or find it interesting. If you did, let me know down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe so you never miss a video. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.